In this video, we're going to be going over how to replace the stem assembly of an Apollo Go. The tools you'll need to complete this repair are a rubber mallet, a pair of needle nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters, 3mm, 5mm, and 6mm Allen keys, and a 24mm socket wrench or normal wrench. So the first thing we want to do in replacing the stem assembly is removing the handlebar assembly completely. So the first step for that is uninstalling this brake line. I've made sure the adjustment screws have the channel lined up. Pull the brake line nice and strong. Pop out the metal ball end. Let that hang to the side. Now I can take my 3mm Allen key and start uninstalling the 6 screws securing the handlebar assembly to the stem. Now that that's complete, I can remove the handlebar assembly, disconnect the communication cable, and now I'm good to put this aside. Next, I'm going to take a 6mm Allen key, start loosening the 2 screws on the side of the base of the stem. Okay, now those screws are loose. Note that you don't need to remove them completely. We just need to make sure that they are loose so that the slot here is not being clamped together. Next, we want to make sure the stem is folded down. Next, I'm going to take a socket and ratchet. This is a 24mm socket. You could also use a 24mm wrench. Place it on the top here. I'm going to strap down the folding mechanism so it doesn't get in my way. Once that's fully loose, I can just remove it, as well as this washer that goes underneath. So now that the top nut's removed and these screws are loose, we're going to flip the scooter over to get better leverage in removing the stem. So before we'll be able to completely remove the stem assembly, we'll need to disconnect the stem light from the controller. So to do that, we're going to open up this control cavity using a 3mm Allen key to uninstall the 4 screws. Okay, now that everything's loose, I can remove the plate. We need to identify which cable is connected to the stem light, the stem LED. Now there are 4 cables going through here into the control cavity. One of them is the brake line, so there's no electrical wires at all. That one's going through here. One of them is the motor cable, which is the thickest of all the cables, and it has the most wires with the yellow, green, and blue phase wires, as well as the multi connector here. One of them is the communication cable, which plugs in into the controller on the top left here. And the remaining one, of course, is the stem LED. It plugs into the controller here, although that's not where we're disconnecting it. We're going to follow it. It's just a red and black set of wires. Follow and trace. And here we have it. So I'm going to remove this heat shrink and disconnect the cables here so I can completely remove the stem assembly. I can just unplug it right there, and go to this end, and gently pull until it's completely free from the cavity. So now we've removed the stem LED connector. I'm going to remove the coil wrap around the cables, because the next thing we need to do is remove the brake line and the communication cable from the stem so that we're able to remove it completely. Now there's 3 cables that are going into the stem here. One is the brake line, one is the communication cable, and one is the stem LED. The stem LED we want to leave there. That's the one we've already disconnected from the controller. So I'm going to hang that to make sure that's not the one I'm pulling. The other 2, one at a time, I'm going to pull gently. This is the communication cable. Note that I'm holding the gasket in place so that it doesn't come out. And if the gasket does come out a little bit like that, it's pretty easy to just push it back in. Now the comm cable is free on the scooter frame side. Okay, now we need to remove the brake line from the stem. The brake line is also coming out of a gasket near the top here. So I'm going to gently push and as well as pull at the bottom. Once we're at the end here, we'll need to give a good push to make sure it gets through the gasket. A little tool, this is just a 3mm Allen key to make sure it goes through all the way. Now we can put the stem back in line and just start pulling from the bottom. And there we go. Now there's no cables running from the stem to the frame of the scooter. We're all clear to remove the stem. So now that all the cables are free from the stem, I'm able to start hammering it loose. I'm going to use a rubber mallet, hitting at this point and at this point to start working it loose from the shaft. It is fit on quite tight, so you will need to use some force. That's why it's very important we use a rubber mallet and not something made of metal that will damage the components. So here we go. So now we have the stem completely removed from the scooter, no wires attached. We've obviously flipped the scooter back over the right side up. And our first step to replacing it is just putting the stem back on. To make it a little easier, we're going to take a flathead screwdriver and wedge it in between the slit here to help create some space and make it easier to install. Now that we have the stem back onto our scooter, we can start routing the cables back to where they need to go. So I'm going to start with the brake cable. I'm going to take this metal head. This goes to the bottom end of this gasket. Force it through. Then I need to make sure it's moving up the stem. So now we can see it's come out all the way. We don't want it to come out that way. We need it to come out of the gasket on this side. Now it's very difficult to get it through the gasket directly. So I'm going to just pull the gasket out, being careful not to damage any of the plastic. Still in one piece. Put that down for right now. Pulling on the brake cable on one end and just gonna push it. There we go. Now I have the brake line out of this hole and I can put it through the gasket before the gasket is installed onto the stem. It's a lot easier. It's important to note the gasket does have a direction to it. Notice on the back side, it's near the bottom. The top side, it's near, or on the front side, it's near the top. If you put it in the wrong way, it will not work. So you need to make sure that on the outer side of the gasket, that hole is towards the top. And we just push it through. It shouldn't be too difficult. And then we need to reseat the gasket. There we go, it's seated nicely. So now I am going to put the communication cable, this end, into the gasket here and have it come out the stem. Now it can be really tricky to get it inside here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove this gasket from the slot. Allows much easier access. Force it through the hole. Once I can pull on the other end, put it in and start pushing it down the stem. You can see it at the top of the stem now, so I can pull from there. Now I can put this gasket back onto the stem. So now our last remaining cable is the stem LED cable that needs to go back into the control panel. So I'm going to take it. This one is small enough that I don't need to remove this gasket. I can just push it through. And there we go. It's all the way in. We want these 3 cables to all be about the same length because we're going to put the coil wrap over them. Now we're going to turn the scooter over and start closing up and making our connections in the control panel. So here's the cable I pushed in from the side. This is our stem LED connector. This is where I unplugged it. So I've already placed a piece of heat shrink tubing here for after I've made the connection. So it's closed. Going to shrink down the tubing to make sure this stays nice and well connected. So now this connection is good. It's nice and well protected. Before we actually close this up, I'm going to plug in our handlebar assembly to our communication cable and just test that the light is working to save myself some grief in case it's not. Plugging in the handlebar assembly, I'm going to press the M button. First I'm going to turn on the scooter. And I'm going to press the M button 2 times fast, turn on the stem light. It's extremely bright, so I can see very easily that it's working properly. Perfect. Turn the scooter off again. Disconnect this, put it aside. And now I'm going to close up the cavity here. So making sure all the wires are clear of the edge, nothing gets pinched. This plate should sit almost perfectly flush with the frame. And I can start taking my 3mm Allen key. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is take the 6mm Allen key and start retightening these screws as much as I can. There we go, that's nice and tight. Now I can install the top nut, making sure this washer goes on first. We have a nice, secure stem on the front forks. So I'm just going to plug this in, start the cable down the stem. Now that that's in, I'm just going to start reinstalling the 6 screws that hold it in place. Now that all the screws are on, the last thing I need to do is just reinstall my brake wire. So I'm going to pull the lever down, get this ball end into the slot. Make sure the channels are aligned and the adjustment screws here. And then I can pull. Somehow got tighter, so I'm just going to do a quick adjustment of the drum brake to give myself some more slack. There you have it. You've just replaced the stem assembly on your Apollo Go.